My name's Pete Vickers. I'm a Windows Development MVP. I've been working in IT before it was called IT. Semi-retired consultant. I specialised in mobile for the last 20 years. I've developed in more languages than I care to remember. So we're going to build a Visual Studio extension. Anybody built any extensions? Did you have fun doing it, or?
Every time they release a new version of Visual Studio, it's around for ages.
Well, we'll get on to the... So what is it? Extends the functionality of Visual Studio. C# or Visual Basic. If you use Visual Basic, there's no Visual Studio Community Toolkit, which we'll talk about in a moment. Can be installed from Visual Studio or simply double-clicking on the file. There's a Visual Studio Marketplace, which we'll talk about at the end. You can upload your extensions there. People can download, make suggestions, etc. So that's the marketplace. A few of the ones that I use, Rainbow Braces, which came from a suggestion from somebody for an add-in. So you get matching coloured brackets in your Visual Studio, and it goes down to many levels. So that's Rainbow Braces. File differ. So without leaving Visual Studio, you can use the add-in there to compare files. Great one from Eric Jensen, SQL Server or SQLite compact toolbox. It'll allow you to migrate databases from SQL Server to SQLite. It'll write all the scripts, transfer the data, write your data definitions for you. It's really good and really free. So in this session, we're going to learn how to write a VSIX using one of my add-ins as a sample project. And all it does is take a SQL script like that for create table, paste special, paste SQL as classes or binding classes, and it pastes it directly into your program as a class and honours whether it's null, nullable, etc. So give yourself a helping hand. Writing visual add-ins used to be quite difficult. They were there was GUIDs everywhere. When you added a new command, it was a new GUID. You had to change all the code and everything like that. There's no community toolkit that you can download. There's the extensibility template and extensibility essentials again, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So within Visual Studio, you need to download the extension development so that you can use Visual Studio add-ins. If you do that, create a new project. So you get the standard VSIX projects. Down here, we've got the community ones, and the VSIX project with a command writes all the boilerplate code so you don't have to write any. So you configure your new project, give it a name, and because I use the add-ins, we get the toolkit and we get a VSCT file, which controls a lot of what's going on. So you've got a manifest file, which will show in the store. So you've got your product name, you've got product ID, which is a GUID, author, etc. You can put some bump in about what it does, you can change icons, etc. You can also say what versions of Visual Studio you want it to use. And I think, as we all know, versions of Visual Studio are a nightmare to work out, which is 17 dot whatever is Visual Studio 22. So 17.6.5 is the latest, and it's a Visual Studio. So you can say it will only work on 22 or later, or you only want it to work on 19. Generally, they'll work on Community, Professional. They should work across all versions. Part of the Community Toolkit is a No Monikers Explorer. If you install it, if you click on Other Windows, No Monikers, you get thousands of icons that are built into Visual Studio. So if you want to put an icon against your button, which we'll see, you can look for message, or you can look for SQL, and you can pick SQL query checked, and it'll import that into your project for you. So we compile a VSIX, and it produces, strangely enough, a VSIX file, which we can open with WinRAR, and all it is a zip file. So it's a bit like a build file, so you get everything that you need in there. So the last time I did this talk was in Liverpool, and I did live coding, and it didn't go well, as live coding tends not to. So we've got a video instead. So create a new project, search, and as I showed in the other slides, we've got a plethora to choose from. But we go for command, community. Just change the name. Clear one of my many tests out. And it creates the project, and as we saw in the slide before, we've got the VSCT file, the manifest file. So this is our manifest. So we just use the GUID, author, paste in some bump. And this is what it's created. So we've got the top menu group, and we're going to put it in the Tools menu in Visual Studio. Then we've got buttons and a button definition with an ID, a priority. It's a button. It's going to be called My Command, and the code behind it is going to be called My Command. So that gets generated automatically. It does move on, trust me. So we fire it up and it fires up another instance of Visual Studio. The first time that you do it in a project takes an age, and the reason is it creates what's called an experimental version of Visual Studio. So it creates all its own hives in the registry. So it's not messing with anything that you do in Visual Studio. It's completely separate. And the first time, as you see from it scrolling through at the bottom, it goes through all sorts before it eventually starts up. I could have edited this to take this little bit out, but I'll allow you to feel the pain that everybody feels when they first fire it up. We're nearly there. So in our experimental version, we create a new project. We'll pick a Windows Forms app. Do the usual. Create a new app. So we've got another wait now as it creates the project. And as we'll see shortly in the top right hand corner, EXP, so it shows you that it's an experimental version, so you've got the two versions running side by side. I put this version in dark mode deliberately so you know which version of Visuals. This is the app we've created to test the normal version. If we view the code, add a space line for later, click on Tools, we've got an extra option, My Command. When we click on it, fires a button up, which we can click on. Sorry. So we run our VSIX, the project runs, creates a new instance, experimental, code already written, adds an option to the tools menu. Clicking on My Command will show a message. So we've got My Command there that it's added to the menu. And when we click on it, so we've got a new add-in to Visual Studio. We've not written any lines of code. The community toolkit's done all the work for us. Before that was done, as I say, everything was based around GUIDs. There was loads to do just to get this up and working. So what happened? As I say, we've got a section that says, this is my group. It's going in the VS main menu, and we're going to put it in the tools at the top level. We've got the button, My Command. That's what button text, My Command, and the code. This has all been generated for us. And we finish up with putting a message on the status bar saying waiting for the button to be clicked. show the message box and then clear. Everything on add-ins is done asynchronously, because as you can imagine, Visual Studio is a massive package. There's all sorts going on in the background. So everything runs asynchronously to make sure that you're not interrupting what's going on with Visual Studio. So we'll add some more functionality. We'll add a new button. We'll set an icon for it. We'll put some code in to call our new button. Write the code, test it out, add the real code, and test that out. So, back to a video. So that was the code that was generated automatically. So we're going to edit the VSCT file. We're going to add another button in. Just copy what we had. And just change everything that said my command, etc. to make it paste SQL, give it different priority. So our button text will now say paste SQL. And paste SQL is the code that we're going to write. And then we add it in to the menu group at the bottom, again changing the value and matching the value to the priority. So this is no moniker Explorer that we were talking about. We'll change it so we've got a SQL query checked. So change the width and add it to our project, overwriting the existing icon. So that's the icon that we've added. So now we're going to add some pre-written code. So I've written two pieces of code, one called paste SQL and the other called create C#. So we add that in, the paste SQL. And if I just pause that. So we're going to wait, just put a message box up, waiting for it to click, set something up. We're going to get text from the clipboard, see if it contains create table. If it doesn't, we're not interested. Otherwise, we'll do create C# class. So we tidy the code up, add a couple of things that are missing. So into commands, because this is going to be the command that's being carried out. I eventually remember which directory I've hidden the code. So we paste in something called create C#. And this is the bit that parses the text we've got from the clipboard and takes the create table into a C# class. And there's a bit for binding classes which isn't included in this. So effectively it's just reading the create table statement and generating a SQL class. So if we fire this up, the experimental version of Visual Studio should fire up quicker this time because it's already been initialized. So it's not going to create all the hives in the registry. You always need to make sure that you've not got two copies of the experimental version working because it gives you a very strange error message. So this time we should be able to open up the project we created before. This is an i7 with 32 gig in. So. I actually moved it to the edit this time. So we should see two new commands in, one of which is paste SQL. So if we step through, we've got nothing in the clipboard. So it's just going to tell us there's nothing there. If we fire up SQL Studio, SQL Server Studio Manager, which I should have had running in the background. Pick a database, a table with something, a few columns on it. So that's a bit meatier. Take our create table statement, copy it back to our code, edit paste SQL. This time when it goes through, it'll find a create table statement. And paste the class in. There's an option in SQL Server Manager to copy straight to the clipboard so you don't have to go through copying it that way. As I say, it honours the null, not null, so you've got a question mark afterwards. As I say, we can do it. Just send it direct to the clipboard. Again, it should go through because we've got a create table statement in. So we built a VSIX from scratch, writing virtually no code. Added a functional button, missing the icon. So what next? Submitting to the store. So marketplace.visualstudio.com. So this is the one that I wrote that's in at the moment. You can put fancy icons on. You can get reports, so 55 downloads in the last 30 days. 488 today, which is a lot more than I thought it'd get. And a five-star review, just the one, and it wasn't from me. But to put it in the library, you get the ability to set the name. You can pick a nice icon. You can put pictures in there so you can describe to people what it actually does. And in this case, it's for coding and programming languages. You can do a description and put all the images in within the description to let people know. Couple of pointers. If you finish up with unwanted icons in your menu, reset the experimental instance, and you can also fire it up. So if you search for experimental, there's a reset Visual Studio and a start experiment, and it just gets rid of everything from the hive and everything you've done before, so you don't get cluttered up. Thanks for the invitation. So hopefully we know what a VSIX is now and how to build one. If you think you've got something people would be interested in, take a look at building it. And if you look at feature requests and see what people are asking for, rainbow braces and things like that are there because people said, wouldn't it be a good idea if? More info, there's a cookbook. Mads Christiansen is the godfather of Visual Studio extensions. He's absolutely wonderful. He's got various videos on YouTube that take you from the beginning of how to do it and then going into how to actually get your commands into paste, edit, paste special, and add in at that level, so you're not limited to the top. He's written an awful lot of the Visual Studio extensions that make things so much easier. So, as I say, I'd look at YouTube, search on Mads Christiansen, and look for his videos. And that's it. Any questions?
I remember when they announced stopped charging Visual Studio extensions, and then 6 months later still nothing changed. So you actually monetize now.
Yes, I think you can. I think most of the ones in the library are still free, but you can charge for them. And you can do a free sample and then make it time out. But yeah, you can monetize.
Is there a way to like have the plugins work for all the other good IDEs? Like Rider. Without building a separate one. So is it kind of something we can use which actually...
You can use it in Visual Studio Code. You can build add-ins for Visual Studio Code. But it's Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code, basically.
Because I imagine if you're building plugins for Visual Studio, you probably want to build the same plugins for Rider, or you're missing like 50% of your market.
Yeah, but I don't know if you can get the same hooks into Rider that you can from Visual Studio.
I gave up on VSIX, and basically what I had was effectively a command line application with a very simple GUI on top, so I just stripped out the GUI to an immediate package. And that's really all my worries about the dimensions of Visual Studio until I just had it distributed in a package.
I got into writing them just because I'd done one for myself and I thought it'd be a good idea. So I did one that generated Uno controls and one that generated Xamarin controls. So I did write the XAML code for you.
Is it possible to replace the existing views in Visual Studio? So, for example, one of my bugbears, if you open a SQL table and just look at data, all the columns are fixed with, every time you open it, despite we're on version 19 of SQL now. Is it possible to, replace that view with your own and say outside in columns?
Well, you could write an add-in that looked at that and resized the columns. So, yeah, so you could do tools, whatever, resize, and then you write the code to resize the columns. They're good. There's a lot you can do, and there's a lot of very good add-ins. And one of the other good add-ins that I meant to mention, if you're using Moe, Matt Lacey's written an add-in that will generate a lot of code for you. And again, that's free. Anything else? All right, thank you very much.